This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Beginning the show is Emily Evans, Agricultural Program Specialist with the Kansas Farm Service Agency, as she explains why it is a slower time period for the FSA. We're also joined by Ron Wilson with the Kansas Profile. Chip Redmond, K-State meteorologist, keeps the show rolling as he provides a weather forecast. He discusses what winter could look like and what factors are playing the biggest role. The Beef Cattle Institute's Brad White, Phillip Lancaster, and Brian Lubbers in today's show with Todd Gunderson as they converse about the importance of appropriately feeding cattle in their second and third trimesters. That and more is coming up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Wednesday show hearing from Agricultural Program Specialist with the Kansas Farm Service Agency, Emily Evans. Emily, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Emily, what's going on at the Farm Service Agency in Kansas right now?
Well, we're in a bit of a slow period right now. We're waiting on a new farm bill. We've closed out our ERP, Emergency Relief Program, for now. So I would say one of the important things that people can be doing is reporting any farm changes to your local office. So that would include any new operators you're going to have coming on, any new owners on land, that type of thing. It's really important to report that to your county office so that they can make changes so that when we do start having more signups, everything is good to go. I would also throw out there that the Livestock Forage Program, or we call it LFP, that's been kicking in as well. So in the last few weeks, we've seen more counties hitting grass for livestock forage programs. So if you do have grass, I'd contact your local office just to see if you might qualify for the LFP program as well.
What are some of maybe those qualifications for the livestock forage program?
So there has to have been a drought in your county for an extended period of time. You have to be listed on some grassland through our acreage reporting process. Those types of things would make you eligible for LFP potentially.
Is this for producers who just have cattle, or just if you have grass, you might be eligible for it?
If you have grass that's being grazed.
What are some maybe upcoming deadlines happening with the Farm Service Agency?
We do have a couple of those. So our NAP program, or Non-Insured Crop Disaster Assistance Program, bit wordy, we call it NAP. That has a December 1st deadline. So folks that have any alfalfa, clover, grasses, mixed forages, some fruits and vegetables that they're wanting to take out, it's kind of like an insurance coverage for any applications for coverage for those. That would be a December 1st deadline. And then we've also got some acreage reporting. Come December 15th, people will need to be reporting their fall seeded small grains. So that would be like wheat, triticale, those types of crops.
With other Farm Service Agency employees who've come in, we've commented it's kind of a holding pattern for the Farm Bill. Still in that same stage?
We're still in the same boat, yeah. We're on hold for things like ARC PLC, CRP. We can't be increasing anything in CRP or doing any new signups. Hopefully we'll see some action through either a new Farm Bill or an extended Farm Bill by the end of December. That's what we're hoping for.
When might things pick up besides just when you get a new bill or extended farm bill?
I think that probably we'll see some more pickup here in January. That's when a few more deadlines will come up for some disaster programs, and hopefully we'll have a lot more farm records changes by then we can be working on for folks for their farms. So yeah, I would say January.
Emily, as we've mentioned a few times, is a bit of a slower time period with the Farm Service Agency, and people may be coming in to do farm changes. So really just a great time to check in with the Farm Service Agency and maybe look into the different programs.
Absolutely, yeah. This is a good time to just check in, make sure you know what's going on in your county, make sure that there's nothing they have for you to sign. Could also be some AGI forms or eligibility type stuff that we do throughout the year. So definitely take a peek into your local office, check in with them, see if they've got anything for you.
And Emily, just wanting to double check, offices are closed on Thanksgiving?
That's correct. Yep, Thanksgiving Day they should be closed, but the rest of the week should be open.
Emily, if people are wanting to find out more information from the Farm Service Agency, how can they do that?
We have websites, fsa.usda.gov, I believe. Farmers.gov would be a website you can use, and just contacting your local office via phone or email.
Emily, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
That was Agricultural Program Specialist with the Kansas Farm Service Agency, Emily Evans. If you're looking to find out more information about the Farm Service Agency or its programs, you can do so by going to farmers.gov. Again, that is farmers.gov. And as always, if you're wanting to find more information in person, you can go to your local service center. If you don't know where your closest service center is, you can find that by once again going to farmers.gov and on your computer in the upper right-hand corner clicking on Service Center. I will link these resources in today's show notes on agtoday.net. Before we cut to a break, we're now going to be joined by Ron Wilson, director of the Huck Boyd National Institute for Rural Development at Kansas State University, as he talks about 1880 beef, which is owned and operated by Andy and Sarah Larson. Andy Larson's family has been raising beef in the northern Flint Hills since 1880. Using his beef production skills and his wife Sarah's marketing skills, they have opened a direct beef marketing business that is sending beef products across the nation.
This is Kansas Profile. I'm Ron Wilson, director of the Huck Boyd National Institute for Rural Development at Kansas State University. The package is arriving at Cape Cod in Massachusetts. What is the package? In this case, it is a package of premium steaks from a ranch halfway across the continent in rural Kansas. This is today's Kansas Profile. Last week we met floral designer Sarah Larson. She is also manager of the family's beef marketing business with her rancher husband, Andy Larson. Andy Larson has deep roots in agriculture and in north-central Kansas. In 1865, his ancestor Eric Larson emigrated from Sweden. In 1872, Eric utilized the Homestead Act to stake a claim in Mitchell County, Kansas. Here he brought his new wife Emma from Sweden. After seeing the Kansas Flint Hills, the Larsons decided to move slightly east. In 1880, they purchased 310 acres of Flint Hills grass and creek bottom land in northern Riley County. The farm is near the rural community of Greene, population 95 people. Now that's rural. The Larsons expanded their farm through the years. The farm headquarters includes a home finished in 1896 that was built by Eric Larson and son John. 7 generations of Larsons have lived within its walls. Andy Larson grew up here, studied agribusiness at K-State, earned an MBA from Emporia State, and met and married Sarah before coming back to the ranch. They live in a remodeled 1911 home. Their daughter Clara is the 8th generation of Larsons to live in northern Riley County. Ever since coming to this region in 1880, the Larsons have maintained a beef cow herd and raised crops. They have also worked hard at improving their beef quality through the years. Their Black Angus beef was so popular that Andy would frequently get requests for a steer or for cuts of beef. He's been taking orders for beef for years, Sarah Larson said. They decided to formalize their direct beef marketing business. They did extensive research on pricing and cuts of beef. Andy knows beef production, and I know how to bring a product to market, Larson said. Using their year of origin in Riley County, they named the business 1880 Beef. The company motto is Taste the Legacy. We're lovers of history, Larson said. She is active in the Daughters of the American Revolution, for example. In order to capture the rich history of the family cattle business, the name 1880 Beef seemed to fit. Today, 1880 Beef offers various premium cuts of beef, many using the term 1880 Reserve. These include the tomahawk steak, Casey strip, smokehouse brisket, cattle baron fillet of beef, baseball steaks, bone-in ribeye, sirloin tips, fajita meat, roasts, and open-range beef bacon. Their signature ground beef is 90% lean. Beef bundles include a mix of these cuts for the customer's use. There are also options for gifting of beef products and subscriptions where customers can sign up to receive a regular supply of 1880 beef products. Sometimes the Larsons are asked, "Where do you get your beef?" The answer is they grow their own. "Our cattle are fed from the corn we raise on our farm," Larson said. "The cattle don't leave the ranch until they go to be processed. At that point, the beef is aged for 21 days in a USDA-certified facility. Beef products are shipped, vacuum-sealed, and frozen over ice packs inside of an insulated pouch. The company uses UPS 1 to 2 day shipping to ensure timely arrival. The Larsons recently opened a retail outlet in Manhattan and have shipped beef from South Carolina to California. We assure quality every step of the way, from conception to consumption, Larson said. As their website states, we uphold stringent standards for the care and feeding of our animals. The Larsons are committed to delivering an exceptional eating experience. For more information, go to www.1880beef.com. It's time to leave Cape Cod in Massachusetts, where a package of steaks is being delivered from a ranch across the country in Kansas. We commend Sarah and Andy Larson for making a difference with entrepreneurship and direct beef marketing. They are working hard to enhance and share beef quality because they have a lot at stake. For the Huck Boyd National Institute for Rural Development, this is Ron Wilson with Kansas Profile.
Once again, that was Kansas State University's Ron Wilson. Today's show will be the last show we have before Thanksgiving, and we will be back with you on December 2nd. However, as Thanksgiving is coming up and usually involves preparing lots of food, I would like to let you know about a news release that has recently been put out by K-State Research and Extension titled How to Safely Prepare and Cook Meats for the Holidays. K-State food safety expert shares do's and don'ts to ensure you and your family are safe. I will link this release in today's show notes on agtoday.net. And if you are wanting to find out more information about food safety in general, you can check out K-State Research and Extension's Rapid Response Center. You can find it by going to www.rrc.k-state.edu. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our Wednesday show talking about the weather with K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond. Chip, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Chip, taking the time to have 11 minutes to talk about the weather with a bit of this longer weekend, and as many have felt, it's gotten cooler outside.
Yeah, finally winter showed up a little bit, with temperatures definitely much closer to normal, even a little bit below normal. We get down into the mid-20s. That's borderline normal to slightly below normal, depending on where you're at in Kansas. And then our high temperatures have been fluctuating around that 40 to 50 degree mark day to day, but definitely some breezy winds adding to that chill and making it feel more like winter. And finally, it took 3 months for cooler weather to get here. We've had above normal temperatures for previous 3 months, and so finally we get the true closer to seasonal conditions. We are kind of on the edge here of colder air to our north and east and warmer conditions to our west as high pressure starts to redevelop across portions of western United States. And that's going to save us and be our lucky thing at the end. We have another system that's coming through this morning that's bringing some weak precipitation. It's going to reinforce that cold air, especially for central and eastern United States. But we're just on that edge. We're going to miss the coldest air of the season by far. It's going to go off to the east and hit the East Coast. And it's kind of one of those benefits of not quite being further east, where we only just get grazed by that west edge of that cold air. We avoid some impressive cold, and then we can warm back up quickly as that pattern of northwest flow, which is that the northwest flow is just air coming off the Pacific Ocean into the northwestern United States, western Canada, and then dipping south just to the east of the Rocky Mountains across the Central Plains. And that's dry air typically. We typically don't get much moisture. There's no bodies of water to our north and west, and so we tend to see very dry conditions with those kind of flows. And as a result, things are going to quiet down precipitation-wise. Yes, we do have that chance of a little bit of rain this morning. After that, things quiet down considerably, definitely a 180 from where we were earlier this month. And we see we're going to have actually several weak clipper-like systems. They're called Alberta clippers. They originate in Alberta. They're colder. They have that Arctic air mass associated with them. And they can bring decent amount of snow if there's the right amount of Gulf moisture that can stream northward ahead of it. But we're not anywhere near that pattern right now. So these weak systems will just help reinforce the cooler air into the weekend. and into early next week, but keep things overall quiet and colder. And we might get a little bit of snow flurries on Friday into Saturday, but right now I don't expect much accumulation in any way, shape, or form. But definitely we're in a much different pattern than we were several weeks ago, and definitely more of a winter look to the pattern.
Are we going to continue to see these cold temperatures as we head into December?
Yes, we're on the western edge of that pattern. When the high pressure is building to our west, we're going to be the first ones to lose that cold, and we're going to lose it sometime middle of next week. It looks like we're going to start to see temperatures warm back up. Some of the models are uncertain. They've not handled this cold air very well. They've definitely underdone the cold air so far by saying it's going to be more moderated, especially to our east. So I'm a little weary of how well the models are picking up on the transition back to warmer temperatures, or at least more seasonable temperatures. And then that'll be the middle of next week to the end of next week. And we'll be the first ones to warm up as that high pressure builds in and that coldest air shifts off to the east. How long that lasts, I'm not 100% certain. We enter what we call a Rex block pattern. So basically we've got an upper level low to the east of us across the eastern U.S. And then in the western U.S., yes, there's high pressure, but there's also a low pressure that undercuts it in the Baja of California. And that tends to block up the pattern and basically hold that pattern like that for potentially a long time. We can see these patterns last up to weeks. And the question will be, when will that pattern break down? And guess what? That's, of course, the biggest struggle forecast models have, is when we have a blocked up pattern, trying to determine when it will break down and how it will break down is one of the biggest challenges. And so we need to maybe approach this upcoming pattern into December with a little bit of uncertainty because we're not quite confident on how it's going to evolve. And that's another great reminder of, when you look at the forecast, especially on apps on phone, you're going to get some wide ranges of outcomes out the next 2 to 3 weeks even. And because these apps only use one model, and we need to look at an average of models, understand when that pattern overall will break down. So kind of keep that an open mind a little bit to the forecast as you go through December. Right now, the main things that we see right now is that pattern is going to hold for precipitation-wise, most definitely into at least probably the first full week of December and potentially even into the middle of December of drier than normal conditions. It basically means we are near our driest time of the year, and drier than normal is no precipitation.
And does this mean we're going to see no La Nina as we look into the winter months?
The La Nina, we've been talking about it for quite some time. Now we're starting to already see, so La Nina, we're just focused on the East Pacific. It's colder than normal sea surface temperatures, the equatorial East Pacific. We've had cooler than normal temperatures. We have to have 3 months of cooler than normal temperatures of at least a half a degree below normal to get a true classified La Nina. Well, we've gone about a month and a half now where we've had that cooler water, but now we're already starting to see warmer water emerge and get turned over in the East Pacific. And warmer than normal water typically means maybe we're averaging those temperatures out. We're getting closer to neutral, and we get a lot of warm water, we end up in El Nino. I don't think we'll get to that point, but we've had enough that we're kind of starting to already see that trend back to neutral ahead of schedule. We weren't thinking it was going to happen until maybe January or February. So I think La Nina will not actually happen. I don't think we're going to get a true classified La Nina. We're just not going to hold those conditions long enough. But we all know with La Nina, we get typically warmer than normal temperatures in the wintertime and drier than normal conditions. We still have the northern Pacific is still behaving the same way as it has really over the last 10-ish years. We have what we call a negative Pacific decadal oscillation. So really warm water in the central and west North Pacific and cool water right off the coast of Alaska and western Canada. That pattern is a long-term pattern. It takes a long time to shift. That's why it's called decadal oscillation. Well, when we have a negative Pacific decadal oscillation, we still have La Nina-like impacts. We still get this really northwest flow that we're in right now. That's the flow that we tend to get on average through these winters of negative PDO, which is very similar to La Nina. So despite us not truly reaching La Nina, I think that we're going to still see La Nina-like impacts despite, obviously early November's been an anomaly in that pattern where we had a lot of moisture and it was more seasonable. But now I think we've definitely trended more towards a La Nina look to this winter, and I expect us to keep it that La Nina look the remainder of the winter for the most part.
And Chip, just taking a look back, we've seen a lot of moisture. Does that mean our soil moisture is still looking good?
Yeah, so if we look back for our soil moisture, but it also interests me as you look forward because we have a lot of moisture in the ground, a lot of moisture available to the atmosphere. How long we stretch this first dry period after that event interests me because we will evaporate more of that surface moisture the longer we go without precipitation. But right now, if we have a short duration drier period, only a week or so, the atmosphere doesn't need a lot of moisture, doesn't evaporate a lot of moisture this time of year because of the colder temperatures. Two things come to mind. First is we have potential for cold periods this winter, especially January and February. If we keep that soil moisture here, then we are going to have a harder time freezing the ground because the ground takes a lot of energy to freeze and to cool off when it's got more moisture in it. It needs more latent heat. Additionally, with that moisture, any storm system that you get moving across the plains, and I think really this morning's a good example where this system is very moisture starved. There's just very little ambient moisture in the atmosphere with this. The surface is going to contribute moisture, and we're going to get just enough additional contribution to maybe get more precipitation. So we get a little bit of a positive feedback from that soil moisture. So as we move forward to the winter, that could be a potential, especially if you look at kind of watching the Siberian snow cover right now, Eurasia snow cover, that can play a role in what the polar vortex does later in the winter. Right now, there's some implication of a strong polar vortex right now, but there's an implication of potential for weakening events as you get into January and February. I think this pattern is going to be really conducive for that, where we get big cold air plunges for a week or two, probably multiple times, I think, this winter, more than last year. And that cold air, if it gets that soil moisture added to it, we could potentially squeeze precipitation out of the air when we normally wouldn't. So a dynamic winter, when we look at things overall, I think Kansas is the battleground state. To our north, cooler than normal conditions are pretty much guaranteed in wetter than normal conditions. To our south, drier conditions and very above normal temperatures. So that pattern's going to ebb and flow, and we're going to find ourselves in the middle with equal chances either way. But I think we're going to trend a little bit more towards warmer than normal and drier than normal just because it's usually so prominent to our south. The one fly in the ointment will be, will soil moisture help us, and will we get an active enough polar vortex, or weak enough polar vortex to get periods of cold air and maybe a couple of big impactful winter storms this winter.
Chip, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Yep, thanks for having me.
That was K-State meteorologist Chip Redmond. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and continuing our show is the Beef Cattle Institute's Brad White, Brian Lubbers, Phillip Lancaster, and special guest Todd Gunderson.
At PregCheck, we do a body condition score on the cows, and a lot of the value of that body condition score is looking forward. But how do I take that and use it to make sure that I'm feeding second and third trimester cows appropriately?
That second trimester is when the cow has the lowest energy requirements throughout the whole production cycle. And so it's a good time to add body condition score to cows if we need to, especially spring calving cows, because once we get into winter and the weather requirements or weather effects increase energy requirements, it gets a lot harder to add body condition to those cows there in late gestation, especially in the wintertime. So a situation like we had around here this summer, we got really dry in late summer and fall, and forages kind of dried up and things like that. And so those cows still had calves on them, and they could have lost quite a bit of body condition there in the last couple of months. And so assessing that body condition score and having a plan going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you've talked about before is that plan is not necessarily prescriptive. And so, Todd, when you worked with your clients as you went through this stage, what are some of the things that you're thinking about as base recommendations to make sure that I don't get behind on body condition score?
Well, I think Phillip nailed it on the head. You have to assess your conditions. You have to look what's going on in the environment. And I'll give an example of that. A couple of years ago, when I was practicing in Alberta, we had an early fall snowstorm, and it kind of caught us by surprise. A lot of my clients' cattle were still out on their summer pastures. Calves were still at side. And a lot of my clients were not able to get out to get their cattle in for upwards of a week. And those poor cows were out there taking care of those calves, and those calves were still nursing, and those cows were having to eat tree bark and willows. And eventually we got most of the cows in and everything was fine. But those cows lost 1 or even 2 body condition scores in just that week from that severe traumatic event. And unfortunately, a lot of us in that area didn't recognize that we had to do some catch-up. And come calving time, a lot of those herds were at a much lower body condition score than they would have been in normally. The feeding program was the same, and we hadn't changed anything. The feeding program that had been sufficient all the previous years had been the same feeding program we initiated, but we didn't think about catching up on some of those cows. And unfortunately, by the time we got to calving, a lot of those cows were just in too poor a body condition to be able to effectively do their job, and we lost several cows as a result of that. It was, and at that point, unfortunately, it was too late. It wasn't much we could do about it. And it was a real powerful lesson to me that this is the time of year right now where you need to assess those cows. You need to be making those changes because, as Dr. Lancaster said, now is the time you can get the most bang for your buck in trying to get those cows caught up. You're in second trimester, late second trimester. You still have some time where you can put some gain on those cows so that when they get to the end of that third trimester, they're where they need to be.
Say we do that assessment and we're mid-gestation and maybe we got a little bit behind. Are there any long-term effects if we can get those cows to catch up? Do I have any concerns about that?
So we think about the effects on the fetus. We're going to think long-term. Yeah, I can get the cow to catch up, but did I have any long-term effects on the fetus? And there's been quite a bit of research that looks at nutrient restriction during that second and third trimester of gestation and long-term impacts on the calf. From a practical scenario standpoint, it's hard to say, and we don't have any good data that I'm aware of, how long that nutrient restriction needs to be to have a negative impact on the calf. So in Todd's scenario where that nutrient restriction lasted throughout the rest of kind of gestation, those cows were thin the whole time, then we probably had some long-term impacts on the calf. But if we turned around and got those cows right back in condition and fed them right after they had lost some body condition score, then it may not have had that big of an impact. We don't really know.
So playing catch-up is not as good as staying in good body condition the whole time. And the impact is beyond just breeding those cows the next year, right? I might get them back to body condition score and get them bred, but I may have an impact on that calf.
Yep.
That's all we have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you on Monday, December 2nd.